Today, I have a story that will take you on a journey of courage, hope, and growth. It is a story for anyone who has ever felt stuck, afraid to take the first step, or unsure about chasing their dreams. You may think learning English is hard, or that improvement will take a long time. But just like the hero in today's story, every small step you take matters. Every word you read, every sentence you listen to, and every phrase you practice brings you closer to your goal. In this video, you will follow the journey of a young boy who dares to leave the comfort of home, face storms, doubts, and temptations, and finally discover that the secret to success, in life or in learning, is taking one step at a time. You will see how he grows stronger, finds courage, and realizes that even the smallest progress is meaningful. By the end of this story, not only will you feel inspired to move forward in your own life, but you will also practice your English listening, reading, and comprehension in a calm, thoughtful way. So, stay with us until the very end, and let this story guide you, step by step, toward your dreams and your English goals. Now let's begin this journey together and see what happens when one step leads to another. Chapter 1. The Weight of Standing Still. The boy stood at the edge of the long, winding path that began just beyond the last house in his village. It curved through green fields, climbed gentle hills, and disappeared into the horizon. Somewhere far beyond that horizon was the city, the place where dreams were said to come true. People spoke of its bright lights, its endless opportunities, and the way it could change a person's life forever. He had heard these stories since he was a child. Each time, his heart would beat faster, as if it wanted to run ahead of him toward that faraway place. But his feet never moved. The path might as well have been a wall, tall and unbreakable, because for years he had done nothing but stand here, watching. He remembered all the times he had told himself, "I'll start tomorrow." It was easy to say it at night when the world was quiet and his mind was full of dreams. But when morning came, reality was heavier. There was always a reason to wait. The weather was too hot. The journey seemed too long. He didn't feel ready. And so the days turned into months, the months into years. In that time, he had watched others leave. Some were older, some younger, but all carried that look in their eyes, the look of someone who had decided to move forward. He would watch their figures grow smaller as they walked down the path until they vanished into the distance. Sometimes they came back, with new clothes, new stories, and a confidence he didn't quite understand. Others never returned at all, their lives unfolding somewhere he couldn't see. The boy told himself he was different. Maybe he wasn't meant for such a journey. Maybe he was safer here, in the place he knew, where every stone in the road was familiar and every voice was one he had heard since birth. Still, when night came and the world outside his small window was dark, he would feel a sharp pull inside his chest. It was the pull of something unfinished, something waiting. That pull never left him. It was there when he fetched water from the well, when he helped his family in the fields, when he sat by the fire at night. It was like an unspoken truth. He was not where he was meant to be. And yet, the thought of leaving brought its own weight, the weight of failure. What if he started the journey and could not finish it? What if he reached the city and found out he was not good enough? Fear whispered in his ear, and comfort wrapped itself around him like a blanket. Together, they kept him in place. Days were predictable here. He knew what tomorrow would bring, and in some ways, that was easier than facing the unknown. But each time another traveler passed through, a small ache grew stronger in his heart. One evening, he stood once again at the edge of the path. The sun was setting, and the light turned the fields a deep, warm gold. The wind was soft against his face, carrying the faint sound of laughter from the village behind him. He told himself he was only here to enjoy the view, yet deep inside, he knew it was something more. He was thinking about how many sunsets he had watched from this very spot, each one a reminder of another day gone by without change. His chest felt tight, as if the air was too heavy to breathe. He thought about the promise he had made to himself so many times. Tomorrow. But tomorrow had betrayed him over and over, turning into a chain of yesterdays that left him exactly where he had always been. Then, as he stood there, something happened. He heard footsteps behind him, light, quick, and full of purpose. He turned and saw a boy much younger than himself, carrying a small bundle on his back. Without hesitation, the boy walked past him and onto the path. His steps were steady, his eyes fixed on the horizon. For a moment, the older boy just watched, his heart pounding. The younger one didn't look back, didn't pause, didn't seem to wonder if he was ready. He simply moved forward. The sight stirred something deep inside the older boy, a sudden, sharp awareness that time was slipping through his fingers. That younger traveler would reach the city long before he even decided to take his first step. And if he kept standing here, the world would keep moving without him. He stayed there until the younger boy was just a small figure in the distance, swallowed by the curve of the path. Then he turned back toward his village, but this time, his thoughts felt heavier than his feet. Something had shifted, though he couldn't yet name it. All he knew was that the silence inside him had been replaced with a question he could no longer ignore. What was he still waiting for? Chapter 2. The first step is the hardest. The morning came quietly, but inside him, everything felt loud. He had barely slept. The question that had been burning in his mind since yesterday had turned into a decision. He could no longer stand at the edge of the path and pretend that tomorrow would somehow be different. Today, he would take his first step. He moved through the small house with slow, deliberate motions. In a corner, he found a worn cloth bag and began filling it with the few things he thought he might need: a piece of bread wrapped in paper, a small water flask, and a thin blanket for the cold nights ahead. He had nothing valuable to take with him except his hope, though even that felt fragile. When the bag was ready, he stood for a long moment in the doorway. The village was waking up. Roosters calling, doors opening, people starting their daily work. No one noticed him standing there, and he was strangely grateful for that. He didn't want to explain. He didn't want anyone's advice or doubts. This journey was his alone. He looked around at the place he had known all his life. Every wall, every tree, every path carried memories, some warm, some heavy. He didn't say goodbye out loud. He simply took a deep breath, turned toward the road, and began to walk. The first steps felt lighter than he expected. For the first time, the path was beneath his feet instead of in front of his eyes. The air smelled different out here, wilder somehow. He let himself imagine the city, the lights, the possibilities, the person he might become once he reached it. But dreams are soft, and reality is sharp. Before long, the stones on the road began to press painfully into his thin sandals. His legs, unused to such long walking, grew heavy. The sun climbed higher, and its heat pressed down on him like a weight. Sweat rolled down his back, and the bread in his bag felt heavier than stone. With each step, the excitement faded, replaced by an ache that spread through his feet and into his thoughts. The road seemed endless. The hills he had admired from the village now felt like walls to climb. The sound of his own breathing grew louder, matching the pounding of his heart. Doubt began to whisper again. It asked him if this was really worth it. It reminded him that the village was still close enough to turn back. In his mind, he pictured his small bed, the cool shade of the trees near the well, and the safety of routine. Those images tempted him, but he forced his eyes forward. He tried to distract himself by counting his steps, telling himself he would rest after 50. But even 50 felt far. He slowed down, his shoulders sagging under the weight of the bag. His dream still felt bright in his mind, but now it seemed impossibly far away, like something on the other side of the world. By midday, the heat was almost unbearable. He stopped by the side of the road to drink, but the water in his flask was already warm. The bread, once soft, was now dry and hard to swallow. He sat for a few minutes, wondering if he had underestimated the journey. Still, something inside him refused to quit. He pushed himself up and kept moving. The road dipped and curved, each turn revealing another stretch that seemed longer than the last. Time passed slowly, measured only by the dragging of his feet and the shadows of the trees moving across the ground. By the time the sun began to sink toward the horizon, his whole body felt like it was made of lead. His legs trembled with every step, and his back ached from the weight of the bag. The golden light of sunset was beautiful, but he was too tired to enjoy it. Finally, he spotted a tree just off the road. Its branches spread wide, offering shade and the promise of rest. He dropped his bag to the ground and sat heavily, leaning against the rough bark. The cool shadow felt like a blessing after the long burning day. As he caught his breath, he let his eyes drift toward the road ahead. The path stretched on, disappearing into the distance. He wondered if he had made a mistake by leaving. The village suddenly seemed so far away, yet the city felt even farther. The sound of crickets rose in the growing darkness, and the first stars began to appear. He pulled the blanket from his bag, wrapped it around his shoulders, and lay down under the tree. His body was exhausted, but his mind was restless. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, only that he had taken the first step, and it had been harder than he ever imagined. Chapter 3. Voices of Doubt. The night was quiet except for the sound of crickets and the gentle rustling of leaves above him. The tree's shade, which had been a comfort during the day, now felt darker, heavier. He lay awake, staring at the dim outline of branches against the sky. His body ached from the day's journey, but his mind refused to rest. Then, faintly at first, he heard footsteps approaching from the road. They were slow, dragging, as if the travelers carried not just their belongings, but also something heavier, perhaps disappointment. Sitting up, he saw 3 figures moving toward him. Their clothes were dusty, Their shoulders slumped. They were heading in the opposite direction, back toward the village he had just left. The oldest among them greeted him with a tired smile and asked if they could share the shade for a while. He nodded, moving his bag to make space. Soon they were sitting together, the flicker of a small lantern casting uneven light over their faces. It didn't take long for their story to come out. They had set out for the city weeks ago, full of hope. But somewhere along the way, things had gone wrong. The road was longer than they imagined. The weather was cruel. Food and water were hard to find. And when they finally reached the city's gates, they were met with cold eyes and closed doors. No one helped them. No one cared who they were or what they had dreamed. One of them, a young man not much older than the boy, shook his head and said, "The city is not what people say. It will take everything from you and give nothing back." Another added, "Better to turn back while you can. There's no shame in it. You still have a home waiting for you. Stay in the village. It's safe there." Their words settled over him like a blanket of cold. As they spoke, he felt his earlier excitement slipping away, replaced by a dull heaviness. He imagined himself walking for days, only to be met with the same cruel indifference they described. He thought of the comfort of the village, the familiar smells of the kitchen, the steady rhythm of daily life, the certainty of knowing where he belonged. Part of him wanted to believe them. After all, they had been farther than he had. They had seen what he had not yet seen. If they were warning him, maybe it was because they knew better. Maybe they were trying to protect him from the pain they had endured. But another part of him resisted. These travelers had given up. Their journey had ended, but his had only begun. Could he really trust their vision of the city? Or were they speaking through the lens of their own defeat? As the night deepened, the lantern's light dimmed, and their voices grew softer. They spoke of the relief they felt now, knowing they were heading back to a place where no one expected more from them. They said that safety was worth more than the uncertainty of chasing dreams. He listened in silence, his mind a storm of conflict. Every reason they gave for turning back was also a reason he had once told himself for never starting. And yet, here he was, already on the road. If he turned back now, what would that mean? That they had been right? That his fears had been right all along? When the travelers finally lay down to rest, he remained awake, staring at the faint glow of the horizon. Somewhere out there, the city still waited. Whether it was cruel or kind, beautiful or cold, he didn't know. But the thought of never finding out made his chest feel tight. In the morning, they all rose early. The three travelers wished him well and started down the path toward the village. He stood watching them grow smaller in the distance, their figures fading into the morning mist. For a moment, he almost followed. His feet even shifted in their direction. But then he turned back toward the city. He lifted his bag onto his shoulder and began walking again. His steps were slower now, and each one felt heavier than the day before. The voices of the travelers echoed in his mind, but so did the image of the path ahead. He didn't know if he was moving toward a dream or a mistake, only that he was still moving. Chapter 4. The Kind Stranger. The second day began with a heavy sky. Clouds hung low and the air felt cold against his skin. His legs ached from the long walk the day before, and his shoes, thin and worn, had already started to hurt his feet. Every step felt like a reminder of how far he still had to go. The road stretched endlessly ahead, and the thought of the city felt like a distant dream. Too far, too big, too impossible. He was beginning to wonder if he had made a mistake in leaving home. As he walked, his stomach growled. He had saved a small piece of bread from yesterday, but it was not enough to fill him. Hunger made his thoughts slow, and his mind kept going back to all the reasons why this journey might fail. He could turn back now, he thought. No one would blame him. But something deep inside told him to keep moving, even if he didn't know why. It was then, at a bend in the road, that he saw him. An older man sat on a flat rock by the roadside. His clothes were patched, and his shoes lay beside him, half repaired. A small box of tools rested at his side. The man's face was lined with deep wrinkles, as if life had drawn its story there, yet his eyes sparkled with an energy that didn't match his tired body. The boy slowed his steps, unsure if he should stop. The man looked up, smiled warmly, and said, "Come, sit for a moment. You look like you've been walking a long way." His voice was calm, like a quiet river. The boy hesitated, then stepped closer. The man opened a small cloth bundle and pulled out 2 pieces of bread. Without asking, he handed one to the boy. "Eat," he said simply. The bread was plain, but in that moment, it tasted better than any meal the boy could remember. They ate in silence for a while, the sound of the wind filling the space between them. When the man spoke again, his words came slowly, as if each one carried weight. "I once walked this road too," he said, looking toward the horizon. "Many years ago. I fell more times than I can count. There were days I thought I'd never make it, but each fall taught me something." He smiled faintly, as if remembering both the pain and the lessons. The boy listened closely. "How did you keep going?" he asked. The man looked at him with those bright, steady eyes. "I stopped thinking about the city," he said. "It was too far. Too big. Too heavy for my mind to carry. So I thought only about the next step. Just one. And then the next. That's how you walk a long road. You don't walk it all at once. You walk it step by step." The boy felt something shift inside him. His thoughts had been tangled with worry about the future, about the size of his dream, about how far away it was. But here was a man who had been where he was and had found a way through. It felt like a small light had been lit in a dark room. They talked for a while longer. The man shared small stories of the road, how he had met people who gave him hope, and others who tested his strength. They spoke of nights under the stars, of days when the sun burned his skin, and of the quiet pride that grew when he realized he could keep moving despite it all. When it was time to leave, the boy stood up, feeling lighter somehow. The man gave him a final piece of advice. The road doesn't ask for speed. It asks for patience. The city will wait for you. Just think about the next step. The boy nodded, holding those words tightly in his mind. He thanked the man and began to walk again. This time, he didn't stare far ahead toward the horizon. He looked only at the ground in front of him, placing one foot after the other. The city was still far, but it no longer felt like an impossible mountain. It felt like a path he could travel, one step at a time. Chapter 5. Storms on the road. The morning had started with a gentle light, but by midday the sky began to change. Clouds gathered slowly at first, like silent soldiers preparing for battle. The air grew heavier, The soft warmth he had enjoyed during the early hours was replaced by a chill that seemed to slip through his clothes and settle deep into his bones. He had been walking for days now, each sunrise bringing him a little closer to his dream, but this day would test him in ways he had not expected. It began with a light drizzle, the kind that could almost be ignored. He pulled his bag tighter against his shoulder and kept moving. But the drizzle turned to steady rain, and the steady rain soon became a downpour. It felt as if the sky itself had opened, releasing every drop it had been holding back for weeks. The path beneath his feet, once firm and dry, turned to mud in minutes. His shoes sank into the wet ground, making every step feel like a small fight. Water ran down his face, into his eyes, and into the collar of his shirt. His hair clung to his forehead. His clothes were soaked through, and the extra weight of water made his bag feel twice as heavy. Even his breathing became harder as the cold wind pushed against him, making him bend forward just to keep moving. He thought about stopping, but where would he go? There was no sign of a village, no trees thick enough to shield him from the storm. The road itself was disappearing. Streams of rainwater cut across the path, washing away the edges and leaving deep pools that he had to wade through. His feet grew numb from the cold water, and his hands began to tremble. The memory of sunny days seemed far away now. He could almost feel his mind playing tricks on him, telling him to turn back, to find comfort, to give up this journey and rest. But he knew turning back would not bring him peace. The storm was just another wall to climb over. If he stopped, it would only grow taller. So, he chose to focus on just one thing, the next step. Not the mile ahead, not the end of the road, just the step in front of him. One step, then another, then another. The rain still beat down, the mud still pulled at his feet, but by breaking the road into these small victories, he found a way forward. At times, the wind grew so strong, it felt like invisible hands pushing him back. The cold bit at his skin. His thoughts began to slow, replaced by a dull rhythm of movement. Step, breathe, push, step, breathe, push. The world had become only water, wind, and the sound of his own heart. Hours passed like this, though he could no longer tell how many. The sky remained a sheet of gray. His legs ached, his back burned, and the straps of his bag dug into his shoulders. But just when he began to think he could go no further, something dark appeared through the curtain of rain. At first, it was just a shape in the distance, blurred by the storm. As he got closer, he saw it was a small hut, leaning to one side as if the years had made it tired. It had no door, only an opening that led into a space barely large enough to stand in. The roof was patched with old wooden planks, but it was enough to keep out most of the rain. Inside, the air was damp, but it was still a relief. He dropped his bag and let out a long breath, the kind that comes when you have been holding yourself up for too long. In the corner, a pile of dry sticks waited as if left for him. He pulled out a small lighter from his bag, one of the few dry things he still had, and coaxed a tiny flame to life. Soon, a small fire flickered in front of him, its warmth slowly reaching his frozen fingers. He sat there, listening to the rain on the roof, and realized something. He had walked farther than he thought. Even in the storm, even with the road trying to stop him, he had moved forward. He wasn't just surviving the journey. He was still making progress. and that, he knew, was enough to keep going. Chapter 6. The temptation to stop. The road had been long and heavy. His feet ached with every step, his back felt stiff from carrying the weight of his small bag, and his mind was tired from thinking too much. For days he had been walking, eating whatever he could find, and sleeping wherever he could rest his head. Then, one afternoon, he reached a small village tucked between two gentle hills. It was quiet here, the kind of place where the wind seemed to move slower and the air felt softer. A group of smiling faces welcomed him, asking where he came from and where he was going. They didn't know him, but they treated him like a friend. Someone offered him a bowl of warm soup, and he could feel the heat travel through his body. Someone else gave him bread that was soft and fresh, the kind he had not tasted in a long time. That night, they gave him a place to sleep in a small wooden house. The bed was simple, but it was clean, and the blanket was warm. For the first time in days, he didn't shiver through the night or wake up from the cold. He sank into the mattress, feeling comfort wrap around him like a gentle hug. The next morning, the villagers invited him to stay longer. They said there was always work to do, and if he wanted, he could help in the fields or in the small bakery by the corner of the square. They promised him food, a bed, and friendly company. It sounded perfect. In that moment, part of him wanted to say yes. For so long, he had been chasing a dream that still felt far away. Here, in this little village, everything was enough. Maybe not great, but enough. There was no danger, no hunger, and no endless road ahead. But as he walked through the village later that day, watching the sun set behind the hills, something inside him began to whisper. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. This is not your dream. He looked at the bakery, the fields, and the quiet streets. Yes, it was safe. Yes, it was peaceful. But deep in his heart, he knew he didn't leave home just to find comfort. He left to find the life he had imagined, the one that would make all the struggle worth it. That night, lying in bed again, he thought about staying. If he stayed, he would never have to worry about finding food or shelter again. The villagers would accept him, and he would live a quiet life. But then he thought about the city, the place he had been walking toward for so long. What if he never reached it? What if he stayed here and spent the rest of his life wondering what would have happened if I had kept going? The thought was heavier than any bag he had carried. He realized that good enough could be dangerous. It could trap you in comfort and make you forget about the bigger dreams you once had. Comfort is not always bad. It can heal you, give you rest, and help you recover. But if you stay in it too long, it can also hold you back. He didn't want to be someone who looked back years later and felt regret. He didn't want to live with what-ifs. The next morning, before the village was fully awake, he packed his small bag again. The blanket was still warm and the bed was still soft, but he stood up anyway. The air was cool, and the sky was just beginning to turn gold with the rising sun. He stepped outside, breathing in the fresh morning air, and looked at the path that led out of the village. It was the same path that would take him closer to the city. As he walked away, he didn't feel sad. He felt light. The village had been kind to him, and he was grateful, but he knew he was making the right choice. Every step away from safety was a step toward possibility. And even though the road ahead would be hard again, he smiled to himself. Because some things are worth more than comfort, and chasing your dream is one of them. Chapter 7. Small Victories. The days stretched on like a ribbon, winding over hills and curling along rivers. At first, he had counted them, marking each sunrise in his mind like a prisoner tallying time. But now, the sun simply rose and set, and he walked in between, his body and the road moving in quiet agreement. The aches in his legs, once sharp and punishing, had softened to a dull hum, a background sound he barely noticed anymore. His breathing, once ragged, had found its rhythm, matching the sway of his steps. Even the weight of his bag no longer felt like a burden, but more like a part of him. The road had trained him without his realizing it, carving away the excess weakness and leaving something leaner, stronger. It was in the smallest things that he began to notice the change. One afternoon, he came to a bridge stretched across a river. The first time he'd seen such a crossing days ago, he had hesitated. The height had made him dizzy, the boards creaking under his weight, his hands clutching the rope rails. But this time, he simply stepped onto it, walked across without a pause, and didn't even look down. Halfway across, he realized what he had done. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Later, he reached a steep hill, its path twisting up into the clouds. Weeks ago, it would have stolen his breath and left him stopping every few steps, leaning against trees just to steady himself. But now, his legs pushed him upward without complaint. His breaths were deep but steady, his stride never breaking. When he reached the top, he didn't collapse into the grass. He just stood there, looking out over the land below, the wind tugging at his shirt, and felt a quiet satisfaction. Then there were the milestone stones, small, weather-worn markers placed along the road. In the beginning, they had been almost cruel. The distance carved into each one reminded him of how far he still had to go, numbers that made his goal feel impossible. But now he greeted each one with a nod, a silent acknowledgement of the distance he had already traveled. The numbers no longer mocked him. They celebrated him. It wasn't just his body that had changed. His mind had shifted, too. He no longer obsessed over the city in the distance, picturing its streets, its lights, the life he would have there. At first, that vision had been his fuel, something to hold in front of himself like a lantern in the dark, but somewhere along the way, it had faded to the background. Now, he simply walked, step after step, breath after breath. The journey itself had become enough. He noticed things he had ignored before, the way dew clung to grass in the early morning, how the sky blushed pink just before the sun appeared, the songs of birds hidden high in the trees. Even the wind had a different voice depending on where it came from. A soft sigh in the valleys, a sharp whistle in the mountain passes. The road was no longer an enemy to conquer. It was a companion, sometimes challenging him, sometimes rewarding him, but always moving with him. One evening, as the light turned golden and the shadows stretched long across the path, he stopped for a moment. He looked back at the road behind him, twisting out of sight, and thought about the man who had started walking from his home. That man had been unsure, easily tired, almost ready to quit at every hardship. The man standing here now was different. He still had far to go, perhaps more than he knew. But something deep inside him had changed. He had learned to notice the small victories, to carry them quietly, like stones in his pocket, each one a reminder that he was stronger than yesterday. When the stars began to appear, he lay down beside the road, his head resting on his bag, and closed his eyes. The thought of the city didn't even cross his mind. Tomorrow, he would walk again. And for tonight, that was enough. Chapter 8. The Final Climb. The city was so close now that he could almost hear it breathing. Far in the distance, rooftops shimmered in the afternoon light, and the walls stood tall, strong, and unmoving. It should have been comforting, but between him and that promise lay the steepest mountain he had ever faced. The path curled upward like a snake, disappearing into clouds that hung low over the peak. His heart sank at the sight. He had thought the hardest part was behind him, but the mountain seemed to say otherwise. He took his first step upward, and the air changed. It grew thinner, cooler, and sharper in his lungs. Each breath felt like it carried less strength than before. His legs, though stronger than they had been weeks ago, suddenly felt heavy again, as if the earth itself was trying to pull him back. The stones under his feet were uneven, forcing him to balance carefully with every step. The incline made his calves burn. As he climbed, the world behind him stretched out like a painting, rivers glistening like silver ribbons, the road winding back into the far hills, small villages like dots scattered across the earth. It was beautiful, yet it made him feel the weight of how far he had come. Each part of that view was a memory, a struggle, a choice, a step forward when it would have been easier to stop. Halfway up, the wind began to howl. It rushed past his ears cold enough to make his skin sting. He pulled his coat tighter and lowered his head, focusing on where to place his foot next. The climb demanded everything from him. He could feel his heartbeat echo in his chest, louder and louder, as if his body was trying to tell him to rest. In the quiet moments between the gusts of wind, memories came uninvited. The first day when his legs had trembled after only a short walk. The endless rain that had soaked him to the bone. The time he had almost turned back after seeing how far the road still stretched ahead. The faces of people who had encouraged him, and the emptiness of nights when no one had been there. Every step now was heavier than the last. His hands found rough stones to steady himself, and his knees shook as he pushed upward. He whispered to himself, words he didn't even plan, just to keep his mind focused. One more step, one more step. The rhythm of his voice matched the rhythm of his climb. Near the top, the path narrowed to a thin ledge, and he had to press himself against the cold rock to keep his balance. His breath came in short bursts, his muscles screaming for relief. But somewhere inside, past the exhaustion, there was a fire. It wasn't loud, but it burned steady, the kind of quiet strength that comes from refusing to give up. At last, after what felt like hours, the slope began to soften. The ground leveled, and the clouds thinned, letting in a golden wash of evening light. He took one last step and stood at the very top of the mountain. The view before him made every ache fade into silence. Below, the city gates stood wide and proud, carved into the stone walls that guarded them. Beyond the gates, towers reached into the sky, and the streets glowed with the warmth of the setting sun. The sound of distant bells drifted up through the air. For a moment he did not move. He simply stood there, breathing in the sight, feeling the wind brush against his face. The city was real now, not a dream, not a distant hope. but something he could reach. He closed his eyes and let the memory of the climb settle into him. This was what it meant to come so close to the end, to face the hardest part just before stepping into what you had been chasing all along. He opened his eyes again and smiled. The final steps lay ahead. Chapter 9. Stepping into the City. The gates of the city rose before him like a promise finally kept. He paused for a moment, his hand brushing against the cool stone, feeling its solidity beneath his fingers. Beyond those gates lay streets full of life, merchants calling out, children laughing as they ran past, and the smell of fresh bread and spices filling the air. For a long time he had imagined this moment, wondered what it would feel like to finally step into the place where dreams were said to come true. Now, with tired feet and a heart that had grown stronger than he had thought possible, he walked forward. Each step on the cobblestones felt lighter than the miles he had covered on the road. His body still ached, but it was a different kind of ache now, a satisfied ache, the kind that comes from knowing you have earned every movement. People glanced at him as he passed. Some noticed the dirt on his coat and the wear on his shoes, but there was a new light in his eyes, a quiet confidence that made them look twice. They could sense that he had traveled far, both in distance and in courage. As he wandered deeper into the city, he saw places he had only dreamed of. Shops with windows full of colors he couldn't have imagined, fountains that sparkled under the sunlight, and streets that twisted like ribbons, leading into corners full of possibility. He realized that the city itself was more than a destination. It was alive, a reflection of the effort and energy of everyone who had walked its streets before him. Every stone, every building, every alleyway seemed to hum with stories, and he felt like he was stepping into one of them. Yet, as he walked, he understood something even more important. The city, beautiful as it was not the victory. The real triumph had happened long before he reached these gates. It had happened on the road, in the nights of doubt, in the storms, in the long days when he had wondered if he could keep moving. Each step had taught him something he could never have learned in comfort. Every hardship had shaped him, made him stronger, more patient, and more aware of his own strength. He remembered the boy who had stood at the edge of the winding path, afraid to take even the first step. The boy who had hesitated, weighed down by fear and uncertainty, who had almost let the voices of doubt turn him back. That boy seemed far away now, almost like someone else entirely. He smiled quietly, realizing that he had become someone different, someone who could face challenges, endure discomfort, and still keep walking toward what mattered. As he moved through the streets, he noticed others who were beginning their journeys. A young girl carrying a small satchel, a man pausing to look at the map of the city, a traveler adjusting his worn shoes before stepping onto the road beyond the gates. He recognized the same uncertainty in their eyes that he had once felt, and for the first time, he felt a deep sense of connection. He was not alone in his struggles, and every journey, every step, was a story waiting to be written. He found a quiet spot near a fountain, the sound of water filling the air around him, and he sat down to rest. The city buzzed on, full of life and opportunity, but he looked inward instead. He thought about the roads he had traveled, the storms he had faced, and the small victories that had kept him moving. He realized that the city had been a symbol, a goal to guide him, but it was the journey that had transformed him. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with warm colors, he looked at the horizon. He understood now that roads never truly end. The path he had taken had led him here, but beyond these streets were other paths, other challenges, and other dreams waiting to be pursued. The journey was not over. It had only changed shape. He stood up, feeling the strength in his legs and the fire in his heart, ready for whatever came next. The city was behind him, but the road within him stretched onward, endless and full of possibility. Chapter 10. One Step at a Time. He stood at the edge of a quiet street in the city, the sun low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. Everything around him was alive with possibility, the hum of voices, the smell of fresh bread, the sparkle of sunlight on stone walls. And yet, in that moment, he realized that none of this would matter if he had never taken the first step. All the beauty of the city, all the excitement of reaching a goal, had only become real because he had chosen to move forward when it was easier to stay still. He thought back to the boy who had stood at the edge of the winding path in his village, frozen by fear, weighed down by uncertainty. That boy had been afraid to start, afraid to fail, and afraid of leaving the safety of what he knew. And yet, that boy had taken a single trembling step, one that seemed so small at the time, but it had begun the journey that led him here. Every mile, every obstacle, every sleepless night of doubt had started with that one decision to move. Looking around, he smiled softly to himself. He understood now that the greatest dreams are never reached in one leap. No mountain is climbed in a single bound. No river is crossed in a single step. It is the collection of many small steps, taken one after another, that turns a dream into reality. And each step, no matter how small, is more powerful than standing still, waiting for the perfect moment that may never come. He wanted to speak directly to those who were watching, to anyone who had ever felt stuck, afraid, or unsure. If you have a dream, he would say, you do not need to see the entire road. You do not need to know every obstacle before you start. You only need to take one step, just one, and then the next. Step by step, you will discover your strength. Step by step, the impossible becomes possible. He thought about all the times he had almost turned back. During the storm, in the nights of doubt, in the village that offered comfort. Each moment had been a choice between standing still or moving forward. Each step he took, even when it hurt, even when it seemed pointless, had built the courage and patience he carried now. That courage was the real treasure, far more than reaching the city itself. The boy in him, the young traveler who had once been afraid to leave home, had grown into someone who understood patience, persistence, and the quiet power of progress. And that growth was proof that the journey matters more than the destination. The city was not the end. It was a milestone, a reminder that steps forward, even tiny ones, accumulate into transformation. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill his lungs. He looked at the road stretching ahead through the city, twisting and turning beyond the gates, and realized that every new beginning is built on the steps we have already taken. Life is full of roads, each one with challenges and rewards, but the way forward is always the same, one step at a time. With a small, determined smile, he lifted his foot and placed it forward. The movement was simple, almost ordinary, but it carried the weight of everything he had learned. It carried the proof that fear can be faced, that doubt can be overcome, and that even a single step can change a life. He walked on, each step steady, each breath calm, each heartbeat full of hope. The city stretched before him, full of opportunity, but he no longer thought about reaching its end. He only thought about the next step, and that was enough. For anyone watching, for anyone who has ever felt stuck, this is the lesson. No dream is too big if you are willing to move, even a little. No challenge is too hard if you take it one step at a time. Begin today. Take the first step, however small. Trust yourself to keep walking. The journey will shape you, and each step will bring you closer to the person you are meant to become. And with that thought, he took another step forward, smiling quietly, walking into a new chapter of his life, ready for whatever came next, one step at a time. Thank you for watching this story on Read and Learn English. I hope you felt inspired by the journey of our young traveler and realized the power of taking one step at a time. Remember, every small effort you make, whether learning a new word, speaking a sentence, or reading a paragraph, is a step toward your own dreams. Progress may feel slow at times, but each step builds your strength, confidence, and skills. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and leave a comment sharing what small step you will take today, whether in learning English or pursuing your own goals. Your story can inspire others just like you were inspired today. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications because we upload videos every day. Stories, lessons, and content designed to help you improve your English while learning meaningful life lessons. Each video is made to help you practice reading, listening, and speaking in a way that feels natural and enjoyable. Take this story as a reminder. The journey matters more than the destination. Keep moving forward, one step at a time, and you will see progress, growth, and confidence in both your English and your life. Now, take a deep breath, take your next step, and I'll see you in the next video. One step closer to your dream every single day.